Welcome back. Well, today we have one of our own in the studio, Letisha Bereola, WJCT's Director of Podcasting. She's here to talk about two exciting projects we recently worked on together and how they connect to our current membership drive, as well as what's new in WJCT's growing podcast network. Letisha, good morning.
Hey, Anne. So happy to be here. How are you?
This is not your first go around this morning. I know you've been on air with David Luckin talking about the pledge drive, but you are, of course, a former TV news anchor here in Jacksonville. We actually worked in the business at the same time, although we worked at different stations. But now you're just down the hall.
I am. And, I have to say, it was such a highlight when I knew I was coming here because I knew you were here. So I was like, oh, Anne Schindler's there. Great.
Well, I was equally excited to hear that you were coming. And so you're now helping to introduce our listeners to on-demand audio. Tell us what you've been building with this WJCT News Now project.
Yes. So we look at this as a bridge. Our radio listeners, they're faithful. They're tuning in their cars. They may be streaming. But we want to introduce sort of this audience to on-demand listening. But in short, it's podcasting, a way to listen to content, original content from WJCT, from NPR, on the go, whenever you want. That's why we say on demand. And so this bridge that we created is called WJCT News Now. And we're making this sort of a member benefit. When you come on board to become what we call a sustainer, someone who gives monthly at a certain amount, you sort of unlock some bonus podcast content from right here from people like you and Stephen Ponson and Dr. Joe, but also with NPR. I mean, they're offering ad-free bonus content from NPR, and we're sort of bundling this together as a thank you when you come on board to support us.
And that's something that is available to people who become new sustainers and members, but for our existing ones,
Absolutely.
This is something that they can access already.
Yes. So if you are already giving at $11.90 and above, you sort of qualify for this member benefit. And we want you to indulge and experience it because you've already unlocked that access. So we're looking at this as sort of a way to incentivize being a member and keeping independent local journalism alive and supporting all that we do at WJCT News, but also opening the door for you to experience podcast listening.
Yeah. So this is early access. There's a number of things that are offered, but one of the things that is included is this podcast that you and I have worked on together for a few months now called Kingpins Catalysts. It's this deep dive storytelling series. We're talking to people with extraordinary connections to Jacksonville. And it started as kind of a small project, but it has morphed, some might say metastasized, but it has turned into a big podcast undertaking.
Yes. I mean, podcast production in general is hard work. I mean, it's a full-on production of organizing interviews, doing the interviews, writing the show notes, uploading it. So we sort of started on this adventure, and I came to you like, so who would you want to talk to, right? We started with, who are you inspired by? And you sort of started making some calls and lining up interviews, and it has evolved to, well, let's give early access to our members, people who sign up to become sustainers. Let's give them a first listen, and then it will be public in April 1st, so everyone can enjoy it. But I'm really excited about this because it was a chance for us to collaborate and think creatively and give you more time, right? First Coast Connect is very structured with your interviews. This is sort of a long form way to get to know some of the people that you are inspired by.
Yeah. And while, it was a lot of work, the easy and certainly the very fun part was having these conversations with these really cool people. And I want to, if we can, play some of the clips so that people get a sense of the folks that we're talking to. One episode in particular that we both like a great deal is this interview that I did with Willie Evans Jr., which when I started talking to you about him and playing his music, you immediately were like,
yes,
I know this.
Oh, yeah. And you had this whole backstory that I had never really heard about sort of this group. And so it became this story that we had to tell, and we had to give it its due justice in time. So it's actually our first episode that kicks off the whole season.
Yeah. And Willie Evans Jr. is still making music. He's a really well-known hip hop artist on the First Coast. But his band that was really successful, Asimov, kind of hit the ground running and then hit a really big snag. And he talks in this episode about the lessons learned from that experience. Let's just take a little listen to what he had to say.
It's important to pay attention to the perspectives around you, because I think our perspective collectively was that we're kind of like a happy to be here type of thing. And if you're not paying attention, people can see that from like miles away, And so they know if you're happy to be here, you don't care about handling your business correctly. You don't care about getting paid. You know what I mean? You don't care about any of that because you love this thing so much. You're just happy to be doing it. And more than 10 people said that it's good.
Yeah, so that's just a short portion of the interview. He also experienced some really difficult periods, and he talks about that too.
Yeah, he had some profound losses. I mean, 2 of the 4 members of the original Asimov have died, both very, very close friends of his. And those losses have informed his music and his art since then. He's written a number of pieces in tribute and kind of along with them, in his spirit. So it's a really revealing and I think, interesting but moving interview with him.
I just remembered, I don't know if we said the title of this podcast, and I think it's so telling when you hear the people we've talked to or you've talked to. Kingpins and Catalysts is the name that we landed on. And, Willie is like a good example of a catalyst, that someone who was like getting all this momentum and moving music forward. And then like his story sort of was disrupted, and he talks about that. And we've got some kingpins too, which you spoke to Ann Finnell. It's a good segue into her. Legendary defense attorney Ann Finnell. That's also one of our interviews.
Yeah, she's extraordinary. I actually remember one time when she was having maybe her last court argument, seeing all of these prosecutors and defense attorneys kind of running out of the courtroom that I was in. And I was like, what's going on? What's happening? And they were like, oh, it's Ann's final argument. She's... nobody wants to miss it. Anyway, she has been on some incredible cases here. She defended Brenton Butler, who was a 16-year-old who was accused wrongfully of murder, and won that case in 2000. But the case also was like covered by a documentary crew. It won an Academy Award. So it is a legendary piece of Jacksonville history. But she also worked on the Casey Anthony trial, which is the woman who was accused of murdering her child and ultimately acquitted. Let's just take a listen to what she had to say about that case.
The media was crazy. I mean, they would follow you every minute you were outside the courtroom, walking backwards down the street. I actually had a guy trip over something and fall down on the ground trying to film us as we're walking down the street. And then you had a whole area that was cordoned off where they had the protesters yelling at you and screaming horrible things like, how can you represent Casey Anthony? I'd never seen anything like it. We had to pick a jury in Clearwater, but I didn't really have to go to court much after that. And then I got the call that there was a not guilty. I was never so relieved in my life. I mean, thank goodness for that, huh?
And again, we're playing these clips because, this is your first podcast. It's being released early to people who sign up sort of today to become a member, a sustaining member. You get to unlock early access to this. And so, that was a well-remembered Florida case, right? Casey Anthony, and she talks much more about her career. And speaking of Casey Anthony, we sort of looked at like what she's doing now. It's interesting. She's claiming to be sort of a legal advocate on Substack now. So she's still out there and
remains a very divisive figure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Another person we talked to, Anne, Dana Miller.
This is interesting because Dana is, we talk about kingpins and catalysts. He actually was a kingpin. I mean, he was a drug kingpin for a number of years. He was ultimately served a long stint in prison, and he's gone on to be a real force on the East Side. He is an inspirational character. He's a barber. He speaks to the community. And I first met him when we were doing a segment on First Coast Connect about trauma and insomnia and the experiences that he's had, which included, many close people to him dying. He himself was shot many, many times. So it wasn't until later that I learned about his role in the crack era in Jacksonville and kind of his role in turning his life around. And he talks about that in the interview that we did.
When they kicked my door in, I was hiding off cocaine. And I had my daughter with me. And when they came in, they told me to put my hands up. I put my hands up. They found my stash of cocaine. They found a lot of money and guns. And when they said, Dana Miller, we have you. They told, put your hand behind your back. I put my hand behind my back. And do you believe I felt peace? I felt peace. It's like God has just taken me away. He was removing me out that lifestyle. And the peace that I wanted, it just came over me.
His story is so intense. I mean, he talks, as you hear a little bit about in that clip, he's doing drugs. He has his daughter there. And then police come and his life really did change in that moment.
It did. And sort of the through line, if you will, through the clips that you're hearing, and you'll talk more about who else you interviewed, is that, these are people who had an impact on the city, or their roots are in the city. And in turn, they impacted the city, or their stories are still being told and sort of recycled into the fabric of Jacksonville. So even in Dana's interview, he talks a lot about the East Side. You know what I mean? With Anne, you hear her talk about being, downtown and working in the city. So you hear these sort of like cultural moments in Jacksonville that you may not have heard of unless you listen to an in-depth conversation with some of these people that you've chosen.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the one thing that is unifying about this is we're talking to people who are kind of Jacksonville and from the First Coast, but have also had really intense and profound impacts on the narrative of the First Coast and the history of the First Coast. In some cases, I know that one of the favorite people that we talked to is a kind of hero of yours, Dr. Johnnetta Cole.
Can we tell them what happened when she was in the building? It was like a legend stepped foot in the building, and people started coming out and greeting her, and she was so gracious and kind and took pictures and gave us wise. I mean, she wanted to talk to my husband on FaceTime. Like, this is Dr. Cole, right? So even that interview, sitting here and listening to you talk to her about, her roots down or up at the beach, right? And her legacy there with her family, and then Spelman College. That's part of what you get when you tune in to Kingpins and Catalysts.
Yeah, and she is sort of everything, right? She's an anthropologist. She's an educator. She actually she was a director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art. So she is, truly a legend on the First Coast. But it's a really interesting look at, like as you say, her lineage, her inspiration, her connections to her sister, who was really well known here on the First Coast as Beach Lady.
Mm-hmm.
But we also talked to Jacksonville University basketball legend Artis Gilmore, who was a really fun interview. We talked to current council member Ken Amaro and Dr. Kimberly Allen of 90 Forward. So some of these people are well known, but they're all reflecting on some really deep and profound and sometimes really painful personal experiences that they had. I think in particular about Artis Gilmore's story about growing up in Chipley, Florida.
Yes. I mean, they're very candid about sort of their early days when Jacksonville was sort of very different. But I like how you've asked them to sort of reflect on the past, but also give their assessment of how the city's doing now, right? You ask them, so, have we changed for the better? Or what do you think of where we're at right now? And each person kind of gave a different answer. So it was really interesting to see how they responded to that.
So this is one of many things, as we said, on this new WJCT News Now offering. This is just one thing. There's a bunch of other things.
Yes.
Including a news element that is really fresh and essential every day.
Yeah. So when we thought about this, we thought, what do people go to podcasting the most for? And every time you see the top podcast, it's usually around news. People want to stay informed on their timetable. So we have a show in WJCT News Now, which is called The Morning Report. And our morning anchor is putting together an expanded newscast so that when you wake up or just on your time, right? We give you the news here on WJCT News 89.9, right?
At the top of the hour.
At the top of the hour, it's there. But if you want something on demand when you're on your walk, when you're on a break, when you're doing the dishes, we wanted to give you an on-the-go version of what we do on the radio. And so when you come and sign up to become a sustainer, meaning you are giving monthly at a certain amount, you get to unlock this on-demand morning newscast in your phone every day. 5 days a week.
And there is also a special offering from our own Dr. Joe. I mean, people already know him from What's Health Got to Do with It, but he does a special thing for the podcast. First Coast Connect does a special thing for the podcast.
Yes, for Dr. Joe. I really enjoy that. It's kind of a shameless plug. I get to interview Dr. Joe. And if you've ever met him or listened to him, he's a dynamic, brilliant guy. So we're breaking down the weekly health news, which we know there's a load of it coming at us.
Oh,
So
my.
he's sort of simplifying, like this episode today is about the measles, it's about daylight savings time, it's about Pope Francis and his illness. So we're trying to stay relevant with what's happening in news, and Dr. Joe is breaking it down.
Yeah, and the First Coast Connect element is really just a way to highlight things that have been on this show in the morning that either, there's a little bit more information, a backstory to, or just kind of wanting to draw people's attention to it in case they missed it.
Yes, and I think this show in particular may evolve even more, Anne. You're already doing a lot, right? You're on the air every day.
Yeah, I'm going to caution you when you're saying that. Exactly what more am I going to be doing?
No, not more, but it's your time to sit back and think, like, what's an interview I really want people to take a second look at, or what I learned in it. Just a little bit more behind the scenes of a particular interview that you really enjoyed that day. We're going to release it again in this podcast feed, but with new insight from you.
All right. So just tell us briefly, I mean, I know you've been running through it all morning, but what is the best way for people, if they want early access, to get to it? They can go to like WJCT.org. They can sign up online.
Yes.
And I guess they can also call in, right?
Yes.
904-353-9528, because we're in the middle of a pledge drive.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, so you can call that number, or you can go to WJCT.org/radio and you can sign up there. But if you call us, we'll help you sign up. I don't want you to be intimidated by like, okay, it's a podcast. How do I get it? We will walk you through the sign up process. And you can become, and that's just a part of it, right? Like the theme of this drive is now more than ever. And why it's urgent to support local independent journalism with your local public media station. So, we're giving this to you as a thank you gift, but really your donation keeps us all on the air doing what we love, and that's to serve you.
Well, thanks so much for being here. Kingpins and Catalysts goes live April 1st, but members get it first. So hope you listen. Letisha Bereola, thanks so much for being here.